Welcome to our occasional professional update for the EB5 industry. We do this rarely, usually only a couple times a year, and it's always free and it's always short, and it's designed to address usually a burning question that the industry has. Since we're all in America, I'm going to read the legal disclaimer as always, that nothing you hear today is legal advice, nothing is financial advice, and everything is strictly educational, designed to arm you with the information that you need in order to think about the complexities of the issues in EB5 unfolding before us. And of course, information is power. So the idea is that with this information, we'll all end the call more powerful than we began. A quick point about the structure and sequence of the event. I'm going to finish my introduction in about a minute and a half. Once I do that, we're going to turn it over to our distinguished panelists. We have 4 questions on the agenda. I'm going to read out the questions. On one of the questions, I'm going to have some brief comments, and that's on Congress. There's been some recent developments in the last day or two, which I think are of interest to people, and we'll talk about that. And then on the substance of the questions burning in everyone's mind about not only demand and supply, but of course, USCIS, always a concern, right? And we're going to have our speakers address that. And then, most importantly, this webinar is for you folks, for folks in the audience. Your questions and your thoughts are as much part of this webinar as anything else. And I encourage all of you to please put your questions and thoughts in the chat box just below. And I will see it on my screen here, and I will respectfully ask our speakers to address your questions as best as they can. Bear in mind that we can address about 80 to 90% of questions. So it's an excellent chance that your issues will get addressed. Just go ahead and put that in to the chat box whenever you are ready. We are going to have a brief commercial introduction, brief commercial. So how about this? I'm going to do the commercial, invite our colleague to the commercial, then we'll introduce the speakers and we'll get started. 30-second commercial. Go ahead, Srikanth.
We've conducted webinars recently for Chinese and Vietnamese agents in September and October of 2021. We have very limited inventory of webinars for Chinese and Vietnamese agents. We can do only 2 webinars for each country in the next 8 weeks. If you're interested, please write to us at webmaster@ilw.com.
All right, commercial break is over. Thank you, Srikanth. And of course, very brief introductions. Neither of these speakers need any introduction to any of you in the audience, but nevertheless, for the sake of the record, I will mention that one of the amazing things about David, amongst the many amazing things that he has done in his long and distinguished career, is when he once told me that he went to China for a short time. He was supposed to speak in 1 or 2 cities. I think it was Shanghai and Beijing or something like that. And he ended up spending weeks and weeks and weeks going to new cities every other day and speaking at dozens of Chinese cities. So that must be one of the EB5 marathons that anyone has ever done from American attorneys there. And that's amazing. And of course, he's helped, he knows EB5 from all different perspectives and has helped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Chinese families through this difficult process. And to the best of my knowledge, Mona's been a prolific creator of EB5 direct structures. She's always been doing that, but since July 1st, she has found a new gear, I think, in her office, and has gone into high gear and has been creating these structures at a fast pace, and has some, a lot of experience in that kind of structure, which is the only kind of structure that can work in the market landscape that we see today. So with that introduction out of the way, I'm going to begin with the first question, and this is the only one on which I will participate, and that's the EB5 in Congress. Does either of our speakers want to get started with HR 5376, which cleared the House on Friday? EB5 provisions therein.
Well, Sam, I thought you're the one who has the most knowledge.
I'll do it, no problem. On page 912, and by the way, as just to make the audience aware, I had told our speakers I'd do it, so they are not unprepared. On page number 912 of a 2,468 page bill is the provision that deals with EB5. And what it says is that the EB5, just in a very short summary, 1-sentence summary, that EB5 applicants can ask for adjustment of status, provided that they're otherwise eligible, which means their 526 is complete, and they are in the United States, and 2 years have elapsed since the 526 was adjudicated. So that's in the bill that the House passed, and it's in the Senate now, and the Senate will decide to do what it wants to do to that language. But that's what we have right now. Now, does either of our panelists want to comment on it briefly as to what that means? Well, so I'll jump in. What it means is, bear in mind, consular processing has been left out. Okay, so as best as I understand it, this is only for adjustment of status and not consular processing. Now, what does this do? Well, bear in mind the other provisions that are in this bill. It allows similar adjustments of status. Now, for the EB5 folks, they have to put in $50,000, but the EB2 and EB3 folks can do it for $5,000 with the same weight of time, right? So what does that mean? It means that the Indian H-1B to EB5 market will go poof if this bill becomes law. All right. On the other hand, there's probably going to be a tremendous amount of activity amongst Chinese students to do EB5 in the United States should this bill become law. And there'll also probably there'll probably be a large sub-industry that will develop to find people ways to come into the United States and stay in status without creating any kind of immigration fraud, and then eventually hope to benefit from this provision if that's lawfully permitted. So that's my quick comments on what may happen. So unless David or Mona want to comment on that, I'm going to jump to the next part of EB5 in Congress, which is the question on everyone's mind, right? When will the RC program be reauthorized? December? Maybe between Jan and March? Maybe between April and June? Or maybe never? What are your thoughts, David and Mona?
Well, I'll start on this one then. So Sam, my thoughts are not until sometime next year. And the reason is that there really isn't the political appetite at this point that what we are seeing for the EB5 program to be attached to any of the bills. We know it's not being attached to the infrastructure bill. It's whether or not it will actually manage to latch onto the appropriations bill next February. If it doesn't, and there is a possibility that it may not, then we're looking at March, April, even up to June, at which point it's going to be a total disaster for many of the regional center projects. So I hope some of the senators pushing the program do get their marching orders.
David, any comments?
Yeah, my sense is that Congress does not recognize the seriousness of not reinstating the EB5 program regional centers. The amount of money that will be lost, jobs lost, and all the things that the whole program has been established to create are in jeopardy. And I don't know if the message has got across to enough of the senators, understanding that if anything comes up, one senator stands up and says no, and it blows the whole deal. So it's a very dicey situation to even guesstimate when this will go through. I'm still telling people that try and file in before December 3rd, which is almost impossible, just in case, who knows, but the likelihood is very slim. Thank you, Sam.
Sure.
I'd just like to add, David, the one interesting thing is, I know that the amount being at 500 has spurred people back into coming into this industry, but it's not from any one country. We're seeing interest from all countries again. And I think that, there really isn't, and it isn't possible to have the kind of investments in direct programs for the amount of people for the amount of possible investors. Sam, this is really going to eat into one of your questions about seeing a flood and whether
so why don't we switch to that question? Let's start with EB5 demand. Will we see a flood of direct investors from China and or Vietnam?
Well, we're seeing it, and the issue with China or with any of them is the time it's going to take for USCIS to adjudicate the cases. Other than that, with this current visas for China and Vietnam, and of course the rest of the world, people are taking this and perhaps misreading it slightly and rushing in to get it done. And my idea is, get in, state your position, and lock in the 500,000 as opposed to 900,000 or whatever new amount might come out of the new law. Mona?
Yeah, well, I think with the current situation with the new visa bulletin, there are two types of investors we're looking at. Ones who've already invested and are waiting, and I often, there's a tale I have to tell of a couple of investors in a direct pool project that we have who are just so frustrated, ready to pull out. And my colleague Rebecca actually told them, she said, hang on, you never know what might happen. You know, famous last words. It just so happened that these all investors have now all become current. So the good news is that all of those investors who have been waiting, and I mean, some of these investors have been waiting since 2015, 2016. So they were very close, but the ones from 2017 as well, you know, those ones were a little further away. They are all able to adjust status and go for the console processing now. However, what about the newer people? What about people who are in the regional center? We've been asked a ton of silly questions from people. I won't call them silly, actually. Questions like, I'm in the regional center, can I use that same priority date and jump over? Well, no, you can't. You know, if you're in a regional center project, unfortunately, you'll have to wait. So I definitely agree with you, David. There is a supply, there's a demand, but I also feel we need to get the numbers into perspective, because back in the day, as you know, back in 2015, 2016, 2017, we could fill up huge projects, 100, 200 people in 1 or 2 visits to China and to Vietnam. And we're not seeing those numbers. And I think we won't see those numbers for other reasons. First of all, right now, the appetite in China is not what it was back in 2015, 2016. There's been a lot of negative press. There's been a lot of negative press relating to some of the big projects. There's been also people who've lost a tremendous amount of money during COVID. I know they've picked up, but then the stock markets have crashed. So the dynamics are not quite there as they were in 2015, 2016. But notwithstanding that, I think even with just a 10 or 20 or 30% flow from China and Vietnam, we're looking at a flood compared to what we've been used to over the last 2-3 years.
Yes,
Very good point.
I'm
Go ahead.
finding different smaller ventures are coming to me to see if they can participate in the direct. I've also designed historically a very large direct, which looked like a regional center, except that each of the little divisions were stores and they all hired the right number of people. But the whole pattern was very much like a regional center. So people went into that quite willingly. And as far as investors are concerned, we're getting, I don't know, 50, 60 inquiries a day off one of the websites we set up for EB5 Direct. So, you know, not many of them will turn into cases, but it shows that there's a sizable interest out there.
You know, it's interesting. If you look at country interest in direct, and I'm talking about direct pool too, where a few friends would get together and they would go out and purchase a hotel, we got far more direct pools from countries in Asia, like Vietnam or Taiwan, rather than China. China tend to be more regional center focused. Just like the Indian cases, they tended to have more direct, but people in the Middle East, like Kuwait, Indians from the Middle East, like in Kuwait or Dubai, they wanted to work in regional center projects. So we are, you know, that same sort of setup is there. But the meetings that we've had, David, I don't know if you're seeing the same, they're not understanding a direct corporate structure, even if there has been some interest in the past. And we are constantly explaining, they're constantly explaining that it's not a regional center corporate structure or regional center sort of setup. And it's very difficult for the agents and for the other developers from the country who are used to having an NCE and a JCE, and then to have one simple NCE and JCE, and hey, wait, we're getting preferred equity, but it's a different kind of preferred equity. I mean, they're all used to the preferred equity model because a lot of the regional centers use that, but they're not understanding how that works in the direct model.
We're designing some of the direct models, again, like looking like a regional center with a JCE, with an NCE, with a loan model, and people understand it. But a couple of things that the public generally does not understand. There was a misbelief in the whole marketplace that only regional centers could do the lower 500,000, which was totally wrong. It was the other way around.
Yeah.
And the other is that you've got to show up to work in a direct and work every day. But we can have the same investor relationship to the business. They can live in another state. They don't have to show up to work ever. And as long as they participate at the level required to remove them from being a passive investor into the necessary requirements for managing the business.
David, we actually don't know if you recall, a couple of years ago, we did a podcast, recorded a podcast together about direct projects. And you actually stated that you actually like direct projects because we could increase the job count. As long as we could justify the position, we could increase the job count, which you can't do with the regional center. You are quite stuck.
Right, right.
Right. Okay, so let's do one thing. That's wonderful. I really appreciate your different perspectives and how people can learn more about what can be done in this current market, and the fact that there is a tremendous amount of interest in there. But let's hear from the audience. Let's hear their views. We have lots of people, dozens and dozens, who have logged in here. How about we start the poll now? Okay, we have designed a few questions which, remember, your panelists cannot participate. If we can have the poll up on the screen, that'd be great technology. And the panelists can't answer the question, but you folks can, and we'll see the answers, all of us together, within about a minute. And that will allow all of us, including the panelists and all of you, there it is, goes on the poll. Please take a few seconds to fill out the questions. We'll all learn from each other in terms of what the opinions of folks are. Are they split? Are people all having a consensus? And we will all learn about it together in turn. And I'm going to ask our speakers to comment on each and every one of these questions. And again, you don't have to necessarily agree with anyone except yourself. Go ahead. May I request you folks to just take a few seconds and fill out your answers to these questions. It's probably 5 to 10 seconds to do it. It's multiple choice. All right, we have the first participant in. I guess it took a little longer than normal because I guess it's 5 questions. Normally we have 3. Okay, we have more people coming in now, a lot more. Okay, that's great. And I'm sounding like an auctioneer, right? We have 10%, more than 10, almost 15% of our audience already filled it out. Can I encourage the others to do it? We'll all learn of it together. It's all anonymized, so we're going to see the anonymized results together in about a minute. And the faster you participate, the faster you can shut me up and start looking at what everybody else is saying instead. And you can hear from what our distinguished speakers will comment in terms of their comments on the opinions that the folks in the audience have. About a third of the audience has finished answering it. Can I request some more folks to take a few seconds to fill out your answers to these questions? And as I said, I'm going to read out the answers for all of us together. And I'm going to ask our speakers to offer some thoughts on the consensus answers. So 5 more seconds. If somebody needs 5 more seconds to fill it out, it's going on. So if you want to do it, then please do it now. Another 3 more seconds, right? Okay, I can still see some people trying to finish it. We're about half done already. Half the audience has finished it. And I'm going to pause for 1 more second. One more person wants to fill it out and close it, or shall we close the poll now? Let's see. Okay, technology, let's close the poll now and let's look at the results. Okay, here we go. So in terms of when the RC reauthorization will happen, it seems like there's a clear central consensus. About half the audience feels that it will happen somewhere in the first quarter of next year. But there is a third who believes it may happen in the second quarter of next year. So on that, any thoughts, David or Mona, or shall we go to the next one?
It matches my thinking.
Okay. All right. So how connected you are to EB5 direct projects? Folks, we know this is the only game in town right now. And it seems that half the audience is already offering EB5 direct projects, and a small number, 15%, is not interested in EB5 direct. And the others are planning to offer EB5 direct, a small number right away, and a larger number, about a third of them in the next year. Any comments on that, David or Mona?
Well, I find it very interesting that there are people who are out there still who are saying not interested in EB5 Direct. I feel that they're not understanding some of the advantages that you do have in EB5 Direct, and you're cutting, unless your business model is such that all you do is construct condominiums, you really can't do anything about it. Those type of projects are just, no matter what, we can't find direct jobs in that.
Okay.
Well, EB5 Direct is the new normal, and we don't know when regional centres will come back again. How many of the developers will survive this or change their models such that they get financing elsewhere and won't be bothered with this, because it's very disruptive to any developer to deal with EB5. There's no assurance of when you'll get your money. It's not like a bank loan closing an escrow and you get paid out. with the smaller operations, smaller people, I see that this is going to continue to grow. It's an excellent way to get your small car wash or small supermarket going, and people go to it because they get to know who the people are. It's very much more personalized. And in some cases, the individual investors actually want to work and earn a living from the program, specifically from Korea. The Koreans like to get involved and get paid and live on it. So these things are very attractive to a lot of people. So I see this having given an impetus into the direct model, which did not come about in 1990 and when the EB5 regional center was forced through at the end of 1992. So yeah, this is going to be good, and it's going to be good for quite a while.
Yeah, the Koreans like the E2 to EB5 model, so they can start directly, except there's no news happening right now because of the consulate. But yeah, I totally agree with you, David. And I feel like there are going to be more models whereby people are going around the country with franchises of whether it's healthcare or whether it's food. But the other thing that I have found that investors have shown to me, and this poll does show it, is that they're enjoying talking directly with the developers, as opposed to the regional center model where they're only speaking with a regional center. I know there's a lot of projects out there where there's still regional centers offering, or there are middle people offering, but on the whole, I would say there's a lot of projects where you are directly speaking with the developer.
Okay, terrific.
I've got one more thing to say. I've got a sizable medical service type company. It has an unlimited growth attached to it, and they're speaking directly with the CEO. They contact me, we introduce them directly, and then they do their deal, because we won't ever recommend a specific project because there's liability and other responsibilities that we as lawyers don't want to undertake. I think Mona has that same concept.
Wonderful. So
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. Just keep moving with the questions. Let's see what the audience has to say on involvement in the Chinese market. And on that issue, the audience seems to be split approximately 3 ways: 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. A third of them have been already active in China in this year already. Another third intend to be active now onwards. And another third say, guess what? I'm not interested in China. Any thoughts on that?
Well, China is a difficult market to get into. It's not so simple. And the problem has been is that the bigger agents have actually jumped the ship, and they're doing other things right now, whether it's European programs or whatever. But there is still a ton of smaller agents who aren't as expensive as the larger agents either. See, that's the other problem we're going to see coming from China, because the big agents always want a back end amount, and direct projects do not usually offer a back end fee. So we are going to see a change in, I think, the way that China projects, or the way that people do go out to China, how they are going to go out there and find the market. Because I don't know if our audience is aware, but China is very heavily regulated when it comes to immigration. And most of the time before, we would never go out and directly speak with an investor. We would go out and we would market to agents. Once an agent was happy with that project, then they would take it to their investors. And that is the way we would fill projects. And that still happens to this day. You have the same experience, David, I'm sure.
Yes. Also, when Sam mentioned the reasons for Chinese not wanting to go forward, was one, the tremendous delay in the visa numbers, which I believe will start to come back. 2 was politics. The relationship between the US and China had substantially deteriorated, and I'd say unfortunately, because there's a lot of benefit each can get from the other. And finally, it's the really tough exchange control that China brought in against its people. They are terrified to take money out because the consequences are so severe. So with that, we're still seeing a reasonable trickle, not a big flow of Chinese investors. And some of them want to do it, and they do it. And now with the currency of the visa numbers, we expect some more, not a terrible large flow as Mona had suggested, that she agreed with. I agree with her.
Okay. So that's the next question about what do you think? We're asking the audience about what do folks feel about the demand for China Direct, and 20% say no change in demand. 75% say, I guess they agree with the speakers, demands will slightly increase, but there's a 5% minority which says expect an explosion in demand. Any further thoughts, or shall we go to supply?
I believe there will be, and we've already given our thoughts on this one, Sam, but I believe that there will be people who will take a chance. But I don't know how advised they would be on the whole situation. As David said, the backlog was a huge shock because for so many people, and we had it in every single PPM, but there were many people out there who said they'd never looked at it or they didn't read the PPM, and it was a huge shock to them that they would have to wait 10 years. So I think that is going to still make people hesitant. But I do know, and I've heard from Chinese who have said they're ready to take a chance. If the project is ready to give them an increased interest payment, if the amount stays longer and they have a direct dealing with the developer, they're happy to take a chance right now.
Now, what we do to help that along, and I think Mona does it as well, she in fact introduced it to me many years ago, we get a third-party country to give them a passport which allows them to get an E. We do the E1 or E2 usually, and you use that as a bridge to cover the years that they're going to have to wait for the EB5. In the meantime, they're in the country, kids at school, they're doing what they want to do, and they're achieving their goal in a slightly different direction.
Yeah, that's where the EB5 Direct really does help the Chinese because they can do this E2 to EB5 quite easily.
Okay. Okay. And that just occurred to me that maybe since there might be future lapses in the program, if a family comes now with an E2 and gets an EB5 Direct in, and even if the regional center program gets reauthorized and they're stuck in a long wait, maybe 2 years later there is a lapse and they can adjust at that time. So maybe it's not so long a wait. In 17 years, who knows how many lapses there might be in this program. But the last question, our audience has a different point of view. How do you think China Direct being current affects supply of EB5 Direct projects? And 20% expect no change in supply, 65% expect that supply will slightly increase, and 15% expect an explosion in supply.
Well, I'd say if we can increase China into other countries, specifically Vietnam and other East Asian countries, then there will be a demand increase substantial, which will then meet what I'm seeing is a very much growing supply. If you watch some of these webinars and some of these ads coming into the internet, there's a lot of stuff out there now where there was hardly any maybe 6 months ago. Yeah, so I see the supply is really flowing in now.
It is, but whether or not its quality is a problem, because we have seen a lot of projects which really, it's back to your square peg in the round hole. It doesn't fit. And that's where I feel the problem is. The favorites, again, people do still try to go into real estate. So they will go into hotels and try to bifurcate the hotel jobs. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It really depends on whether or not the developer is able to really process the jobs properly, because many a time developers mess up. For example, a developer might might say, I have 30, 40, 50 direct jobs, which I'm going to bring into my hotel, but then doesn't realize that the company that he hires to do the cleaning is an indirect job and not a direct job. Where I see this really exploding, quite frankly, and David, you touched on it, is the medical health franchise and non-food industries. We are seeing that I think we've got more interest in the health, and we even have a veterinarian, would you believe, project as a franchise, as well as assisted living homes and things of those nature. And if they can control that they don't need an awful lot of money, that's another huge advantage. Investors feel comfortable when there's about 4 to 6 investors, and the repayment looks very comfortable because it's like, okay, this is a no-brainer. I am going to get repaid here. It's not like there are that many jobs that I won't get repaid. And in addition to, the healthcare, food, there are other industries. We're seeing a lot of more transportation, like trucking, because trucking is another one, but trucking is a tough one. And the FHV industry works very well in big cities. It doesn't work on small cities. So that it depends again on the industry. Oh, another industry that we're seeing is pharmaceutical.
Well, I've seen a demand on restaurants and franchise restaurants. And that's a risk people are apparently willing to take, because we see them moving through 5 at a time. But I'm inclined to the view, be cautious with restaurants, because this is very cyclical. You never know what's going to happen with a particular type of thing, which is the flavor of the month this month, and nobody will buy it in 3 months' time. These are the issues there. That's why your more stable assisted living and so on is really there and useful.
Well, that's where COVID has really made a difference. In COVID, we've seen projects. In COVID, what did well? IT projects did well. The healthcare projects did well. Anything to do with you're right, with that type of mindset. But the interesting thing about restaurants, a lot of restaurants, typical restaurants, did go down. But the restaurants which actually made a profit in COVID, and where we are seeing the demand in EB5 Direct, are restaurants where there are cloud kitchens. So you have the technology added to it, to the restaurant. So, we have moved on. It's not the Direct of 2011 or 2013. It's not gas station and car wash Direct. It really has moved to a different phenomena right now.
Well, that's incredible. Cloud kitchens, the first time I heard that term. So now I'm going to talk about cloud gas stations and cloud auto detailing or whatever. Okay, folks in the audience, we have a couple of other items on the agenda to get to. But before we get there, I want to remind you once again that this is intended to be an interactive webinar. If you don't want to take advantage of it, that's up to you. But I really and sincerely hope you do. Go ahead and put your question or thoughts into the chat box down there. This is the time of the industry where the industry is in tumult and where the direction is not completely clear. And a conversation about issues that are of importance to you is actually going to help everyone, not just you. It's going to help everyone in the audience. So may I encourage folks in the audience to be brave and put down your thoughts and questions in the chat box down there. I will respectfully bring them to the attention of our speakers and ask them for their thoughts on your questions. So please go ahead and type that in, and I'm encouraging you to do that as soon as you can. All right. Remember, there's no fixed time period for this. So once we get with the agenda, the next two questions, and if there is no further questions from the audience, we're going to say goodbye. So you determine the time based upon how much interest you have in hearing about the thoughts that are uppermost on your minds. All right, now let's go to the next question. Well, we have to complete this one because we didn't address this. Look, before November 8th, before the visa bulletin came out, the December visa bulletin, there was a situation, as best as I could tell, that there was a demand-supply imbalance. There was a greater demand for EB5 Direct than there was supply. And the December visa bulletin has simply made that worse. It has made the demand-supply imbalance that much worse. More demand has come in and supply takes time to catch up, as we know. Okay. Now, the point is that what does that do? Generally speaking, when you have a demand-supply imbalance in any market, price is what changes. Right? And what price are we talking about? We're talking about the price that the middleman gets, the price that the Chinese agent gets in order to place these securities. My suspicion is that that price is going to go down and has already started going down fast. But maybe you agree, maybe you don't. And by the way, folks in the audience may have thoughts on that too. Please put them in your chat box right here, and I'll summarize them and I'll anonymize any questions or thoughts that may come in. So you don't have to worry that your name is going to get immortalized. You're welcome to put in an anonymous thought if you like to do it that way. And I'll keep it anonymized when I bring it up to the speakers. What are your thoughts on agent commissions, David and Mona?
Oh, we've already started seeing that. So we have projects which have been approached by agents, and the agents have given their usual demand. And guess what? The developers are like, we don't need to. We're getting enough direct, and we're making some money out of the admin fee too. So, we don't need to start paying back end. So that's where we are seeing a difference. I did pick up on this earlier. I think that's why you'll see the big agents not necessarily coming into the foray. You will still see smaller agents who are quite happy taking 35, 45, maybe the full 50 of the admin fee, but are not going to the back end. And you know what? It's welcome. It's going back to how it was back in 2010, 2011, before some of those big real estate regional centers spoiled the market.
Yeah, I think there was agreed on the side of the agents as well. So the prices of $120,000 against a $500,000 raise were literally, in our terms, as if you have real estate brokers, obscene, just way out of line. And I'd raised this with a couple of the agents, and they literally said, we'll do it while it lasts. So the lasting has ended, and this is going to come down for sure. And I'm seeing it in the back end is not as easily accepted by any of the projects I'm dealing with. One or two actually have jumped into it, which I was surprised about, but they found it worked with their model because their model was so well balanced.
We are seeing securities violations, though, David. I have seen several, and I keep reminding everybody that, you know, SEC could be back at any point. In fact, we have done we have represented projects in front of the SEC, which were doing direct some few years ago. So it's not that the SEC care whether you are a regional center or whether you're having a direct project. And one should still be aware. One still needs the PPMs. One still needs all of the disclaimers, and you still have to make sure you're following, you know, Reg D and Reg S, and you're not paying any local person any commissions. I can't say that enough. So even just because it's direct doesn't mean to say the rules change. They don't.
You know, our mindset is that direct and regional center programs are subject to the same laws, and you need to cover yourself correctly and do the right thing.
Oh,
So,
Sam,
in alignment with
we
you.
have 3 questions. So shall we go through the questions so far? And by the way, people can continue to ask more questions. I'm going to read the questions out, and our thoughts from the panelists will follow. The first question, I'm going to not mention names. So let's keep the names anonymized so people feel comfortable asking questions. The first question is there a chance that the RC program will not be reauthorized and USCIS will deny all the pending I-526 RC petitions?
You know, I'm the eternal optimist. I'm going to say no, that is not going to happen. It's too big a program. It brings in $4 or $5 billion a year. I don't think that will happen. There would be too much of an outcry, and it would just be super unjust. And whether you like this administration or not, they're not an unjust administration. Notwithstanding that, whether the RC program is permanently hurt by this period, that's a different story. I do see the RC program in coming back. I just feel like it's going to take a long time. I don't think it's going to be super fast.
I agree with Mona, except for the thought of the experience I've had with immigration and with Congress. You actually never know. So I would answer that slightly differently. There's a tiny chance of it not coming back, but my expectation is that it will come back.
Okay.
Well, Senator Grassley will do everything to make sure it doesn't come back. It's his way or the highway, I think.
Well, let's hope there's a lot of grass growing on his highway and it stops. But nevertheless, you know, he's Grassley after all. But the next question is, let's suppose somebody goes ahead and invests in a direct project today. What are the timelines for getting a green card? Any thoughts?
All right, so I'll start, and David, I'm sure you'll continue. And apologies for cutting into you.
Okay, absolutely.
We have traditionally found that our direct are faster adjudicating. Traditionally, and it doesn't matter how well we do the documents, there's very rare that there isn't an RFE, because it felt like USCIS just did not understand any other model other than a typical vanilla real estate model. Saying that, we have seen some improvements, and I would say that, let's say we carry on with the space that we're doing, and with what USCIS have said themselves have said, the space that they take approximately 8 hours per case, they should adjudicate all of the direct cases that they have within the next 6 to 12 months. So my thoughts.
Okay. I have seen a softening with USCIS based on what the director's position was when she was brought to the table. But I relate it to a big ship in the ocean. It's going in one direction, and it's been pushed there for 4 years, and now it needs to turn around and go in the other direction. Big ships take a long time to turn. The model that delay and deny is what we would call it over the prior 4 years was instilled in these people, and many of them had that as their own personal feeling anyway. So it's going to be a tough challenge to change their philosophies, but it will change again, because this, through my nearly 40 years of doing immigration, is a pendulum. It's been right up on the right now, and it's slowly coming back to middle, and it may even go towards left, and that's not political, it's just a scale of one side or the other.
There is one point, though, David. The first in, first out policy that USCIS have had for the last 4 years has hurt our investors from Vietnam and in China, because they deliberately did not adjudicate the Chinese cases. So we would have large projects where all of the other people from all the rest of the world would be adjudicated, and they would deliberately miss out the Chinese. So I do hope that USCIS do abandon that policy. They should be abandoning it now.
Right, I'll redefine that for you slightly. The first in, first out policy that used to be was given up by immigration, has caused all the problems Mona alerts to. And if it comes back again, I don't know how it'll help, but there's always the request for the expedited cases. I've got a couple on my desk at the moment. And if they meet the right tests, they're going to push the first in, first out off the shelf again.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Next question is, why do you feel a full set of documents similar to an RC offering is necessary, since simple documents were approved for direct EB5 in the past?
Oh my goodness. I have argued this with developers now so many times. Whoever asked that question, you need more than a full set. Our direct projects and direct pooled projects have requested, USCIS have requested more documents than our large regional center projects. But in everything, as far as job creation is concerned, they go crazy. If, for example, you have 6 positions, six of the same type of position, they will go in each every single category, and they'll say, well, why do you need 7 of these? Why do you need 3 of these? Why do you need, and they will not let you go. They will keep on hammering. That has been our experience over the last few years. The corporate structure, they go crazy. They do want to know. We have had in our direct pool projects questions relating to accredited investors. Matter of whole, they've been more strict in our direct than they have in our regional centers. So I would say, yes, you need the full set of offering documents. If you've been lucky, if you haven't had that, the only time you don't need a full set of offering documents of any sort or of the same nature is if it's an entrepreneurial petition. Say it's 2 brothers, 2 friends, they're both in a managerial position, then you don't need a PPM. But if they're not, you do need a PPM.
I agree with that. The small number of investors, if you have 1 or 2, put your disclosures and your warranties into a subscription agreement and you don't need a PPM.
Yeah.
But as soon as it gets bigger, the protection is not for the investors, it's for the developers, because they are the ones that are going to get hit with lawsuits if they don't carry it out correctly. So they will take that business decision and see whether they're willing to go with all the documents or not. We will always offer all the documents and scale back depending on circumstances.
And one other point on this area is that the very nature of direct EB5 is operational, and you tend to have a wider array of industries. USCIS has limited knowledge, and they don't understand industries, just like a lot of due diligence people really don't understand some of the industries, because you have to have in-depth industry knowledge as well as locale knowledge, etc. Therefore, you do need to put a lot more explanations, and the explanations need to be relevant. So we have found that we've had to put feasibility reports where we've not needed to on other projects, for example.
Now, I found that immigration have taken a position which I don't think is in their jurisdiction, to prejudge whether a business will be successful or not, and not let the business or entrepreneur make that decision, where some of these guys have had a tremendous amount of experience, and the immigration officer sitting in his little cube has probably had 0 or a shade above. And this has struck me for quite a while, that it's not their position, specifically where you show something going into the future, and your job ramp up and even your investment ramp up is into the future, which the regulations specifically allow. They can't get to that. They want to know, where is it all now and why don't you have it all now? And they put out, as Mona says, these long RFEs.
Well, I mean, the theory, wasn't it supposed to be that this is supposed to be an at-risk investment, right? And if somebody wants to throw the dice and say 50% chance I'll get my green card, and 50% I won't be able to create my required jobs and I'll go back, I'm taking a chance with the American economy.
But Sam,
that's USCIS trying to stop Congress from doing that.
Yeah, but Sam, what USCIS doesn't understand is that these are operating businesses which are running, and the kind of questions they ask are crazy. They will look, for example, they will look at a Google map of a project, which was three years outdated. And we'll comment on these Google, it's very difficult to keep on, not pulling your hair out at looking at some of these RFEs. But I feel that USCIS really need to understand how an operating business works and move away from your vanilla, regional center type projects, which is all they seem to be understanding.
Right. By the way, now, folks, we are close to the end. We've got two questions. Both of them are similar, so I'm going to handle them at once. But that's going to be the last question I asked, unless you post something in right now. So if you want to post something in the next 30, 45 seconds, great. Any questions or any thoughts, you're more than welcome to do that. If not, I'm going to go to this last question, and we're going to call it a day at that point. So let's see what happens, whatever the audience wants to do. So these two questions are similar, so I'm going to kind of club them together. The issue is, what happens? Let's say somebody was an investor in a regional center project. The program, Congress decides in its wisdom never to reauthorize it again. What do the investors do?
That's a difficult question. And that really depends on the project. Can the project repay you? I mean, first of all, do we know this is going to happen? The problem that we're going to probably have is that this is just going to keep on and keep on. And if we don't get reauthorization by next June, you are going to get some people who are antsy and want to come out. And there are people who will just keep on being patient and keep on waiting. Some of the projects will be able to refund and perhaps restructure their projects so that they can accommodate the direct model. A lot of projects won't be able to do that.
I agree with you there, Mona. I just see from our office point of view, we're getting a whole lot of full projects and individuals requesting withdrawal and not understanding that they're probably not going to see their money, that they might as well hang in and they may even get their green cards. But we're not salespeople. We just give them the pros and cons and they make their decisions.
Okay, very good. So that it looks like nobody asked more questions. So I'm not going to put in an additional advertising commercial break either. Oh, we do have a question. Okay, very good. That's a very good question. And it's an excellent question. And it's completely related to the subject. So before we get to that one, we're going to have a commercial break for 30 seconds. And then we'll come back to the last question of the day, and then we'll wrap it up. Go ahead. Commercial break, please, Shrikant.
We've conducted webinars recently for Chinese and Vietnamese agents in September and October of 2021. We have very limited inventory of webinars for Chinese and Vietnamese agents. We can do only 2 webinars for each country in the next 8 weeks. If you're interested, please write to us at webmaster@ilw.com.
Fantastic. And let's turn to the last question of the day, and then we'll wrap it up. How do direct EB-5 projects sustain jobs? How does USCIS look at job creation at the I-829 stage?
All right, I'll start, David. I'm itching to start on this one. So this is a common misnomer which I've heard in projects throughout. They all start jumping up and down about having to sustain jobs. The law does not say that you have to sustain a job. First of all, it is the creation of a job position, not a individual job itself. So it's the positions you're creating. Even if that position is only filled for 2 days, if you can show it's a legitimate position, USCIS will accept that. And we've had many a project where the jobs have not been there, where the position has not been even filled, and USCIS have accepted that. Secondly, what you have to sustain is the actual investment. So there's often a confusion, and people will say, oh, you have to sustain the jobs for 2 years. No, 2 years is a threshold that USCIS put out that they like to see if they're not sure whether a job is permanent. But that doesn't mean to say that if a job has only been there or a position's only been there for 6 months, it's not arguable. You cannot argue that it is permanent. You can, and we have done successfully. Well, before I go on, I'll let you, David, start in, and I'll add more thoughts.
Totally in alignment with what you say. We've had several of our projects, unfortunately, going into bankruptcy before the 2-year conditional residence is up, and we've had those conditions removed because the jobs were created. In these cases, were specifically created to the full number, and there's nothing that immigration can say that they never reached the 2-year threshold that they're trying to impose.
And when they're looking about how does USCIS look at job creation at the 829 stage, I can tell you from experience that our petitions sent out to USCIS are typically between 91 and 140 pounds of documents.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah. Seriously, because we have to throw everything out to USCIS. They want to see tax returns, they want to see the I-9s, they want to see contracts, management contracts, issues relating to whether that person is real or not. Everything, you name it, they want to see it. And we end up having to supply all of these documents. And if it's a project which has been in operations for 5, 6, 7 years, you are going to have that kind of documentation. Even the tax returns themselves will be heavy. So there's a lot that you have to send back at the I-829 stage for direct, far more than at the regional center. And again, I feel like a lot of this is because the last 4 or 5 years we've had a lot of difficulties under the Trump administration. I mean, they totally ignored what went on before and they started questioning everything. So that also added to our angst. And I'm sure, if we're feeling this in direct pool to other projects, and we also co-counsel with other with other attorneys, and we've noticed the same issues coming up and creeping up in their documentation as well.
Well, I'm going to be a little cavalier on this one and say that I think things are getting better and we will not have to go to the extreme that Mona's talking about. I had the theory, you put up a tax return, you put up the proof of jobs, you put up the proof that the money's there, and you stop at that point. And if they come back with an RFE, you deal with it. And I've had a number of those go through, even in the prior administration. So Mona is doing the right thing by being super cautious and conservative. I'll take a bit of a chance on that because the amount of work that goes into it for the fee we get is just not worth doing the kind of work with 140 pounds of paper going out through FedEx.
Yeah, I know. I hate the feeling of all the trees that we cut down.
And the service will not accept electronic stuff, and they are determined in destroying the world's forests, right? So
one last point on the job creation, by the way, and this is in USCIS's own rules. Once a position has been created, even if that position is only there for a certain period of time, let's take, for example, a project where they had to change because of COVID. They had created all of these positions pre-COVID, and then post-COVID they changed. Those positions no longer exist. Well, that still is a position you can count at the 829, even if that no longer exists at the time of filing the 829.
Understood.
Agreed.
So everyone in the audience, now you have your marching orders. Make sure that your elevators, freight elevators designed to carry paper, are reinforced to carry all the additional paperweight. If you want to go EB5 direct to China, clearly it's an opportunity. It seems like a modest size opportunity, but I'm guessing the minority thinking it's going to be explosive. We'll find out, all of us, within a short time. And with that, this is goodbye. I want to thank all both our speakers for their kind thoughts and comments. I want to thank all of our participants for participating. And with that, this is goodbye from ILW.com.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, ILW.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mona. Bye.